Happy holidays, everybody. A special guest here, Steve Helwagen, here from Buckeyes 24/7 to talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. Huge game for Miami. Miami's into the quarterfinal. Ohio State will be playing their first playoff game this season here in the Cotton Bowl. The teams will square off December 31st. Steve, let's get into this in terms of Ohio State. 12-1, obviously with winning the national title last year, 12-0. Let's just start with this last game that they played, that 13-10 loss to Indiana, the Big Ten title game. What stood out to you about that one, and maybe some of the reaction in terms of the players, coaches, as they look to obviously improve on their performance from last game?
Yeah, Chris, it's been kind of a weird year for Ohio State. They opened up with Texas, who Texas was number one in the preseason coaches and AP poll, and Ohio State was two in the coaches and three in the AP. And Ohio State won the game 14-7. And really after that, they didn't have another problem all the way until they got to the Indiana game. In fact, they beat everybody they played in the interim, those 11 teams, by at least 18 points. And the two closest were Wisconsin, or rather Washington and Illinois. Those were the two closest, both on the road for Ohio State, won both those games by exactly 18 points. So you go into playing Indiana, who, obviously they've beaten Oregon on the road, which is the first time we could say, okay, Indiana really is legitimate, in this 2-year run that they've had. They finally beat a top 10 team. And so you had to respect what they kind of brought to the table, I guess. And it turned into this, defensive matchup, just like the one you guys just saw with Miami and Texas A&M, where they're punting the ball back and forth. There weren't, excuse me, many turnovers, but Julian Sayin, who is the most efficient passer in the country and top completion guy, threw an interception early in this game, and the Ohio State defense went out there and held Indiana to a field goal. As the game wears on, Ohio State can't really establish the run. They can't protect Julian Sayin. They'd only given up 6 sacks the entire season. They gave up 5 in the first 2.5 quarters against Indiana. They finally pulled out the right guard and put in a replacement. And the guy they pulled out, Tegra Shabola, is not going to play in this game. He had some type of a procedure. He apparently was playing hurt, much to the detriment of the Ohio State team, obviously, because he got beaten for a couple of the sacks. So they get Gabe Van Sickle in there. They move it down the field twice, but then disaster struck inside the 10-yard line on 4th down. Sayin slipped and fell on a quarterback sneak. And then on the next 4th down inside the 10-yard line, the kicker, who's ordinarily pretty reliable, he shanked it, pulled it dead left, hooked it past the goalpost, on a tight angle. He was on the right hash and overcompensated for that. And Indiana gets the ball back and takes it, all the way down to the final seconds before they had to punt it back to Ohio State, and did not give Ohio State a chance to win the game at the end. 13-10, Indiana guts it out. Ohio State defense, they get an A+. They held a team that was averaging 44 points a game to 13. You got to win that game 99 times out of 100, and lo and behold, we saw the 1 in 100 that you didn't. So Ohio State's offense just kind of mired in neutral, terrible play calling, terrible execution, and the 2-star wide receivers both coming off injuries, Carnell Tate, Jeremiah Smith. Smith had a big game, but they didn't do much with it. So that's kind of the long and short of it. They picked a really, really bad time to play by far their worst game of this season, and really one of the worst games they played really in the Ryan Day era, probably.
And I think that's obviously going to be the big point, right, Steve? And I'm sure Ohio State fans, everybody that's talking, was that essentially an aberration, or is it a sign of things to come? And as you mentioned, this time of year, you can't afford things to kind of continue and linger. I think we saw a little bit of that from a Miami perspective playing Texas A&M. Similar situation, but that the Aggies were coming off a loss, and some of their issues kind of carried over to the Miami game. And Miami's with their pass rush and their defense, they're looking to obviously continue that momentum. They pull out the win against Texas A&M, only scoring 10 points, so it's a little bit, uh, that's not going to work either. Obviously, that's not the ideal way. As Ohio State clearly saw, that 10 points is tough to win games like that. But I think what's interesting with these teams is which team's going to show up. Miami's won five straight, but they've got to get their offense going. So we'll stay with that, Steve. The defense of Ohio State, it's well known. Leading the country in yards per game, only allowing 213, the 8 points. Nobody scored over 16. All the talent, really at all levels. How can you sum up what makes the Ohio State defense so tough to go against? And certainly it's going to be a challenge for Miami. They're going to want to get Carson Beck to efficient passing game, mix in Mark Fletcher the run game as we saw last game, and then get Malachi Tony the ball as much as possible. But what makes the Ohio State defense so tough?
Yeah, Christopher, I look at it that it begins up front, which they graduated four seniors on the defensive line off last year's national championship team, all of them drafted into the NFL, and they had four backups ready to go. And Kenyatta Jackson, Caden Curry at defensive end, and then the defensive tackles, Caden McDonald, he's originally from Georgia, high school athlete from Georgia, and he is really developed into one of the best defensive tackles in football. He was an AP All-American. He was, I want to say, unanimous All-American by the five major people who put out, or groups that put out the All-American lists. The other defensive tackle spot has been Taiwan Malone and another outstanding high school prospect from a few years ago, Edric Houston. He was kind of banged up a good part of the season, but they're splitting time pretty much right now. So it really, the tone starts up front because Caden McDonald is one of the great run stuffers at defensive tackle that I can remember. Curry and Jackson are also good run players when they're not rushing the passer. So that's where it begins. You had a guy in Arvell Reese, a first-year starter, who was an All-American, I believe. I want to say he was unanimous. If not unanimous, he was a consensus All-American. And Sonny Styles, the other linebacker, also earned some second and third team All-American honors as well. So you had one of the best linebacker groups in the country. Now, Arvell is a great athlete, very instinctual player, but the last four games of the season, he really didn't do much in terms of tackles for loss, sacks. He really didn't have much. People schemed up against him and did a much better job against him. Then the secondary quietly has become one of the better secondaries in Ohio State recent vintage. You've got another All-American, Caleb Downs, at safety. You got one of the top corners in Davison Igbinosun, a great young corner in Jermaine Matthews. The slot corner is Lorenzo Styles Jr. He began his career at Notre Dame as a wide receiver and came back home. Theoretically, he and his brother Sonny are from Pickerington, which is right outside Columbus, and they're reunited. Their dad was a star player for Ohio State in the mid 90s, and I believe, I don't know, I don't think he was on the team in 95 when they played Notre Dame, but at any rate, he was an outstanding player in his own right. And then the other, what am I missing? The other safety, Jalen McClain. Jalen McClain, a young guy, yeah. He has had a bang-up season as a first-year starter. The problem in the Indiana game was they gave up two big hits, and they also had a bad pass interference penalty on Jermaine Matthews. I think Matthews gave up a couple of big hits, or one big hit. Lorenzo Styles gave up a big pass, and that allowed Indiana to flip field position. They gave up a touchdown pass to Elijah Surratt, one of the top receivers in the Big Ten this year, caught a touchdown. I think it was against Matthews for Indiana's lone touchdown. So that, in a nutshell, you give up two or three big plays and you lose the game. So otherwise, they played lights out, didn't let Indiana run the ball much. And, that's their defense in a nutshell. They've been outstanding. they've been really good. I don't, they haven't played a lot of great offenses. I mean, Washington was pretty good. Arch Manning at the beginning of the season wasn't very good. Obviously, became better, as the season went on. Uh, Illinois was okay. Michigan was terrible offensively. Who they beat there in the last game of the regular season. And that's not to say anything about UCLA, Minnesota, Rutgers, all these other terrible teams that they played, Purdue throughout the season that just had no answer for them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be key for Miami offensively to get into a little bit more of the balance that they want to go with. It worked out well for Miami to be able to lean on Mark Fletcher in the run game last game. I feel like it's going to be now certainly a challenge, but I think Miami's got to find more success in the passing game. And I think this is what we're seeing. Everybody's going to be keying in on Malachi Tony, and I think that they're those outside guys, C.J. Daniels, Keelan Marion, they've got to get some more production with some of those outside receivers. The tight end position hasn't been a big factor for Miami all season long. Lofton kind of made some catches, so we'll see. But Carson Beck, the efficiency has been there, and they've been, protecting him well, and that's been a big key for Carson. Offensively, you touched on with Julian, but I want to start with Jeremiah Smith. He's a guy that obviously Miami fans are very connected with. We've seen him kind of grow up as a star from the youth ranks, the high school. Everybody knew this is what he was going to be. It's been even fun for Miami watching him from afar, even as disappointing it was that it wasn't in a Miami uniform. What makes him so difficult? And then essentially, how have teams kind of guarded him throughout the season? That he's still putting up the big numbers, the 80 catches, over 1,000 yards, the touchdowns are there. And I know you touched on his injury a little bit, him and Carnell a little bit. But just Jeremiah, coming into this one, I know it's obviously a game he's really looking forward to, certainly.
Yeah, he was the nation's number one overall prospect, came to Ohio State last year, won every freshman award you could win, was an All-American, probably like a second team pick, I think, by a lot of people last year. So coming into this year, he was the favorite probably to win the Biletnikoff and ended up as a first team All-American. Kind of a bitter thing that they gave the Biletnikoff to Makai Lemon from USC and not to Jeremiah Smith. But, the numbers were comparable, whatever. For whatever reason, it didn't go to Smith, who was like sixth in the Heisman Trophy balloting, but Lemon, not mentioned anywhere with the Heisman, gets the Biletnikoff. So it was kind of a weird thing. But the issue with him, he suffered a quad injury. He thinks it happened in practice, probably in early November. He tried to play on it against UCLA, and they shut him down in the second quarter. It didn't go real well. And so he misses the next game against Rutgers. And this was an injury that they thought would take 3 or 4 weeks to heal. And so he's bummed out, thinks he's not going to get to play against Michigan. And he and the training staff worked very hard to get him back in 2 weeks from the UCLA game to the Michigan game. It was somewhat of a miracle. And, he had a hand in that win, like 5 catches for 50 yards, something like that. But really played a great game against Indiana. I think he was, I don't have the exact numbers, like 5 for 130. Now, 40 of those yards came on the last play where they were backed up in their own end and they just threw it up for grabs at midfield and he caught it, but time ran out, so they couldn't throw one more of them, to the end zone to try and steal the game. But Indiana just said, okay, you can catch it, whatever. And so, 50 of those yards are a little, funny, but at any rate, he is believing he'll be back to full strength. Carnell Tate, I think, was limited against in Indiana because they pulled him off the field in some instances and went with 3 and 4 tight ends, much to the chagrin of every Ohio State fan everywhere, because those, they call them 13 and 14 sets, 1 running back, 3 tight ends, 1 wide receiver, or 1 running back, 4 tight ends. Didn't produce any results against Indiana. So in short yardage, and as we said, they got inside the 10-yard line 4 times, a touchdown, a field goal, stopped on fourth down when the quarterback fell down, and a missed field goal. 10 points on 4 times inside the 10-yard line. That's a good formula to lose games. So that's exactly what happened. So I expect Smith to be 100%. Tate, I honestly don't know. We'll probably get a better idea when we get a chance to talk to him when we get down to Texas. And, but I expect he's going to play and have some impact in the game. And those two guys they're magic. I mean, you can never predict which one's going to have most catches and most yards, but one of them is going to. So most weeks.
Yeah,
So,
it's been impressive watching what they've been able to do, and just the talent shines, as you're kind of saying, week in and week out. It's been impressive. They want to run the ball. Bo Jackson's got over 1,000 yards, and Julian Sain, as you mentioned, his efficiency there. Steve, just kind of wrap it. I mean, we've kind of touched on it, the different sides of the ball. Just maybe keys to the game that you think are keys for Ohio State in this one, as they, again, trying to get past that, what happened against Indiana, and keep this thing moving. What do you see as the key in this one, or keys for Ohio State as we wrap this up here?
yeah, I think it was interesting that Texas A&M was one of the best third down defenses in football. And I'm not sure what Miami did against them, but it was good enough to win the game. I think they were able to sustain some drives and make some plays and here and there. And to me, third down is going to be probably the critical down on both sides. Ohio State they've hit some big plays, certainly, but, they've been more of a methodical 10-play, 80-yard type team with Julian Sayin in a lot of those drives going 5 of 5 for 70 of the 80 yards. I mean, it's been uncanny what he's been able to do. So if Miami has got a great pass rush, certainly, and their job is to do exactly what Indiana did, which is make him uncomfortable. And when the protection was better in the second half, Ohio State did move the football, but obviously didn't do anything with it, didn't score any points. So to me, that's the big thing. Third down, sustaining drives on both sides. Ohio State's got to get pressure on Carson Beck, make him have more of a Louisville type game, than one of his other better games. I know he had over 250 yards in 7 of the 13 games now, so that's not bad, obviously, and 3,000 yards for the season. So the Buckeyes got to do something to counter him, or potentially, if he's given time, he could make some great plays. So I think we're in for a heck of a game. The line being 10 points feels and seems like an awful lot, but Ohio State was a machine up until Indiana. I haven't settled on a final score yet. I don't even know what to say. I do believe Ohio State's going to win the game if Smith and Tate are healthy, but if it's more than the 10 or less than the 10, I don't think I've quite figured that one out yet.
Yeah, and I think Miami's got to, especially early on, just the whole atmosphere of the Cotton Bowl. Miami's not, they played the playoff game and certainly got some experience there. But
Yeah,
just this
to win
neutral,
at Texas Tech or Texas A&M in front of 110,000 people, this will be nothing compared to that. I think Ohio State, out of 75,000 people, probably will have 40 or 50,000, but
I think that
I mean,
the early game success momentum. Miami essentially just kind of like, hey, we're here. I think they need that in a game like
yeah,
this.
the belief.
Sure, and both sides of the ball have some success, and kind of we'll see how the game kind of plays out. I think that'll be kind of big, and obviously kind of some. I think about consecutive series. You don't want to have two bad series or on offense or defense where it just really puts you back or giving up. 2 touchdowns. I think that's going to be something to watch for. But Steve, I appreciate taking the time. Happy holidays to everybody, and you and yours as well, especially taking the time to do this. It's a difficult time. But look, everybody's getting excited, kind of getting geared up now for this game just a few days away. But I appreciate you taking the time, Steve.
All right, Christopher, take care.